What if, all this time, the ears of millions of fans have been misled, and a song that sounds like a full, emotionally charged collaboration among BTS members is actually nothing more than a single voice perfectly disguised? Could this be merely an auditory illusion, or is it instead the most unsettling proof of a vocal power from Jungkook that we have not yet fully understood? This question exploded like lightning in the middle of the night within the fandom when a simple post on the platform X, formerly known as Twitter, suddenly shook ARMY's collective perception of a song titled Jungle. A track that, to many listeners, sounded crowded, layered, even like complete BTS, was abruptly pulled into an academic operating room and examined coldly, scientifically, without emotion, and the results, paradoxically, made emotions erupt in every direction. On January 13, 2026, at 10:44 Greenwich Mean Time, a fan account named @staleofunfai uploaded an analysis titled in Korean, Jungkook, Jungle Bunsa, fact check. The title alone felt like an open challenge, as if saying, "Stop assuming, let's prove it." Within hours, the post began to spread slowly but surely, gathering dozens of likes, reposts, and hundreds of views, numbers that might seem small to an algorithm, but enormous for a purely technical vocal analysis that appeared on the surface entirely unsensational. Yet that was precisely where the danger lay. This content did not sell empty emotion, did not steer shipping narratives, did not exploit inter-fandom conflict. It arrived with data, diagrams, and cold language, and perhaps that is why its impact cut so much deeper. The account @staleofundersforsNTY was not an anonymous profile without identity. Its bio stated firmly and without compromise, "One and only Jungkook. I hate shippers." A declaration that might feel aggressive to some, but to others signaled a clear position. This was not fantasy content, this was a claim about reality. For images were uploaded in sequence, each containing detailed explanations of the vocal structure of Jungle, complete with acoustic references and links to YouTube videos believed to contain the song's audio or demo. There was no mention of Jimin, no Taehyung, no Jin as vocal contributors. Not as backing, not as harmony, not as hidden layers. Everything, according to this analysis, was Jungkook, recorded repeatedly, stacked with extreme precision, then fused until the human ear lost the ability to distinguish what was one and what was many. This is where unease began to surface. For years, ARMY had been accustomed to recognizing the vocal character of each BTS member almost instinctively. Jimin's distinctive breathy softness and fragility, Taehyung's deep and sensual baritone, Jin's bright, powerful timbre with emotional vibrato. This identification was not merely a hobby, it became part of the fandom's identity itself. So when an analysis claimed that all those traits merely seemed to be present in Jungle without actually being there, a larger question emerged. Are we truly hearing, or are we simply believing what we want to hear? The first explanation offered by @staleofundersforsNTY sounded technical, almost boring to those unfamiliar with music production, but that was precisely its strength. Jungkook, according to the analysis, recorded his vocals in 3 to 5 different layers for each section of the song. These layers were not simple repetitions, but subtle variations in pressure, tone color, and resonance placement. When combined, they created the illusion of a rich chorus, something usually achievable only by multiple singers with distinct characteristics. This time, however, everything came from a single set of vocal chords. The effect was so convincing that the listener's brain automatically filled in the gap with an assumption. This must be another member's voice. The analysis went further, touching on harmonic aspects, something rarely discussed in fandom spaces. Every human voice produces natural harmonics, additional frequencies that appear above the fundamental pitch. When Jungkook's vocals are stacked and aligned with high precision, these harmonics collide and merge, creating a wide sound spectrum. At this point, the human ear begins to panic. High frequencies can resemble Jimin's head voice, while lower resonance may recall Taehyung's baritone color. Yet according to the data presented, none of this originates from anyone else's vocal cords. It is all nothing more than acoustic shadows. Perhaps the most shocking, and for some the hardest to accept, claim was about technical consistency. Jungkook's vocal transitions in this song were said to occur within a range of about 1 millisecond, a number that sounds trivial, almost meaningless, but in the world of audio, 1 millisecond is the difference between distinguishable sound and seamless fusion. Transitions this smooth make layered vocals sound like a single organic entity, rather than stacked recordings. The final result is a deceptive listening experience. It feels like a collaboration, yet it is purely solo. However, perhaps the most provocative part of the entire analysis was not its technical detail, but its implications. If Jungle truly contains only Jungkook's vocals, then where did the subtitles listing other members' names, widely circulated across platforms, come from? The answer offered was cold and blunt: fan-made. Creations of fans, not recording data. A statement that indirectly challenged a long-standing fandom practice of blending emotional interpretation with production facts. In a reply to their own post, at @stale_of_I wrote a conclusion that is now quoted everywhere: that Jungle is a solo recording that maximizes Jungkook's vocal ability, and the feeling of only hearing Jungkook's voice is not an illusion, but a fact that can be explained scientifically and acoustically. The sentence sounds simple, but its impact is anything but. It forces listeners to replay the song, this time with a new suspicion in their ears. Have we truly been hearing it wrong all along? Or have we just witnessed a level of vocal mastery that blurs the boundary between one and many? Amid all of this, one thing has become increasingly clear. Jungle is no longer just a mysterious song whose official status has yet to be confirmed by HYB. It has transformed into a field of discussion, a space for debate, and a large mirror reflecting how we understand music, group identity, and individual power within it. And if this chapter is only the beginning, then even bigger questions await ahead, about vocal comparisons, about a divided ARMY response, and about the possibility that Jungle is not merely a song, but an early clue to something far greater in the post-hiatus era of BTS. Because after the initial shock subsided, the discussion around Jungle did not stop at a single simple question of who is singing, but instead expanded into a far more sensitive realm: how we have long constructed our perceptions of voice, identity, and roles within a group as large as BTS. At this point, what initially appeared to be an academic vocal analysis transformed into emotional fuel, splitting ARMY into smaller camps, each convinced that they were holding the truth point. One of the most intense parts of @stale_of_I's post was the direct comparison with the vocal characteristics of other BTS members. It was not done in a dismissive tone, nor with the intention of erasing anyone's contribution, but through an approach that felt cold and almost clinical. Jimin, for example, is widely known for his distinctive breathy vocals, his emotional use of head voice, and the fragile nuance that often becomes the emotional core of BTS songs. Yet in Jungle, the analysis stated that none of those patterns were present. There was no breath-driven phrasing, no soft onset that gradually blooms, no airy texture that usually emerges when Jimin sings in his upper register. What remained was a vocal that sounded dense, controlled, and consistent from beginning to end, traits more commonly associated with Jungkook. The comparison did not stop there. Taehyung, or V, with his deep and sensual baritone, has long served as a tonal anchor in many BTS songs. His vocal color is easily recognizable, even to casual listeners. However, according to the analysis, Jungle did not display those characteristics. There was no heavy chest resonance, no slow vibrato lingering at the end of phrases. All of the low, dark sections could instead be explained as the result of layering and EQ adjustments applied to Jungkook's own vocals. This was the point where many fans began to feel uncomfortable, because what they believed to be proof of other members' presence was suddenly deconstructed into purely technical effects. Then there was Jin, known for his high belting and silver tone that is often cited as one of BTS's emotional strengths. Jin is recognized for his ability to sustain high notes with rich vibrato, creating climaxes that feel grand and powerful. Yet once again, the analysis argued that Jungle showed no such belting transitions. There were no signature emotional surges associated with Jin, no significant shift in vocal color as the notes reached their peak. Instead, everything sounded stable, precise, and controlled, a character consistent with Jungkook's technique. This was where the tension began to rise. For many ARMY, recognizing each member's voice is not merely a technical exercise, but part of an emotional bond. When this analysis suggested that listeners' ears had been fooled by harmonics and layering, Some felt enlightened, while others felt as though their experiences were being dismissed outright. Does this mean that all along we were only hearing what we wanted to hear? Or is the analysis too bold in simplifying something that is inherently subjective? What further intensified the debate was the way acoustic science operates without compromise toward emotion. The human brain, according to many studies, naturally seeks familiar patterns. When hearing a song associated with BTS, the brain automatically links certain vocal layers to specific members. This is not deception, but a natural cognitive mechanism. However, when vocal recordings are arranged in such a way that they mimic a broad sonic spectrum, that very mechanism becomes a vulnerability, a gateway for auditory illusion. The analysis of Jungle highlighted this sharply. Jungkook's layered vocals, recorded across multiple registers and levels of vocal pressure, created a spectrum wide enough to fill the space typically occupied by several singers. The harmonics generated by these layers interacted with one another, producing frequencies that to an untrained ear sounded like variations in vocal character. Yet when separated technically, they all originated from the same source. At this point, acoustic science begins to feel almost cruel, because it does not care about nostalgia or emotion. It speaks only in sound waves. Reactions within the ARMY community soon began to surface, even though the post itself was still relatively new. On one side, many praised the analysis as proof of just how extraordinary Jungkook's vocal ability truly is. They viewed Jungle as an extreme demonstration of what a vocalist can achieve when given full space to explore technique and production. On the other side, some questioned the motives and consequences of such analysis. Is it necessary to emphasize that a song is only sung by one person, when BTS has always highlighted collective strength? The discussion became even more compelling when placed within a broader context. BTS is currently in a post-military hiatus comeback phase, a period filled with expectation and speculation. Jungkook, with his solo projects and growing global spotlight, often finds himself at the center of attention. So when a mysterious song like Jungle appears and is then analyzed as a purely Jungkook vocal work, many see it as more than mere coincidence. Is this an experiment, a warm-up, or a subtle clue pointing toward the musical direction ahead? HYBE to this day has not issued any confirmation regarding Jungle. There has been no official statement, no clarification of the song's status, let alone of the circulating vocal analysis. This silence only amplifies speculation. In fandom culture, silence is often louder than any statement. Every hour without clarification allows discussions to grow wilder, theories to multiply, and emotions to intensify. Yet beneath all this debate lies one undeniable fact. Jungle has forced many people to listen again, with sharper ears and more open minds. The song is no longer heard as mere background entertainment, but as an object of analysis. And perhaps that is its true power, not simply in who is singing, but in its ability to spark dialogue about the boundary between technique and emotion, between the individual and the group. At this point, the question is no longer whether Jungle truly contains only a single voice, but why this song emerged in such an ambiguous way, almost as if it were deliberately left hanging in a gray space between fan content and serious work. Why does a technical analysis from a fan account feel more convincing than the silence of a major institution like HYBE? And why, out of so many songs that could spark discussion, is Jungle the one that has pushed ARMY to once again question the boundary between solo and group, between the individual and BTS's collective identity as a whole? Many fans have begun to read Jungle not as a song, but as a signal. In BTS's history, such signals are nothing new. Demos, leaks, or experimental works have often surfaced long before any official narrative was established. What makes this case different, however, is its extreme focus on a single person. If Jungkook truly is capable of filling a vocal space usually occupied by several members at once, then Jungle is not merely a technical demonstration, but an artistic statement. A statement that a single voice, when produced with vision and precision, can create the illusion of togetherness. This is where the fandom's emotions are tested once again. For some ARMY, this idea ignites an overwhelming sense of pride. Jungkook is no longer seen only as the golden magne, but as a vocalist with an almost unfathomable capacity. For others, however, a quiet unease begins to surface. Will the excessive spotlight on individual ability shift the collective narrative that has long been the foundation of BTS? Or is it, in fact, this very extreme capability of Jungkook that explains why BTS has been able to endure and evolve as a group? Speculation about the future has inevitably followed. Some see Jungkook as a prototype for a future solo project, perhaps something darker, more technical and more experimental than his previous work. Others believe the song is nothing more than a vocal exercise, an acoustic playground never intended for wide public consumption. But if that is the case, why were its traces left so easily accessible, complete with audio material that can be analyzed again and again? HYB remains silent, and that silence feels increasingly heavy. In the K-pop ecosystem, silence is rarely neutral. It often becomes fertile ground for expectations to grow unchecked. Without clarification, Jungkook continues to exist as a half-official, half-mythical entity. It is dissected, debated, and projected onto a future that does not yet exist. And perhaps that is precisely where its power lies. Jungkook forces listeners to be active, to question, to engage, and not simply accept what is heard on the surface. In the end, were we all truly hearing it wrong? Or have we simply come to realize that listening is not a passive process, but the result of expectations, habits, and the desire to find certain meanings? Jungkook, whether as a song, a demo, or merely an experiment, has opened a crack in the way we understand Jungkook's voice and, more broadly, the way we understand BTS itself. It leaves us with one final question, unanswered and perhaps never officially addressed. When a single voice can sound like many, is the boundary between the individual and the group still as clear as we once believed?